It was the jury's verdict in the Trayvon Martin case that really caused a collective voice to come together when it came to the anger of African Americans. Then, of course, then we began to see more shootings. Then Eric Garner happened. A lot of people forgot John Crawford III happened right after Eric Garner. And what happened after John Crawford III? It was Michael Brown. In front of that, you had Aiyana Jones in Detroit, Rekia Boyd in Chicago, and these stories began to build and build and build, and black folks in different cities around the country began to really express their anger. But it was the Michael Brown case where all of these things sort of came together in a perfect storm that really thrust Black Lives Matter into a much larger platform, if you will, across the country and across the globe. So how do folks actually feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? According to Howard University and Harris Insights did an analytical poll, 83% of black folks have a favorable view of Black Lives Matter compared to just 35% of whites. Now remember, this ties exactly in to what Brittany had to say and what Liz had to say in terms of how the focus is. So people say, yeah, I appreciate you out there protesting, but the real issue is you should be doing something else. Now, again, when they throw in this question, what should black folks be concerned about, such as black-on-black crime or police brutality, 49% of blacks said, oh, that's the issue. Whites said, 77% of whites said, oh, be more focused on black crime as opposed to police violence. But you never hear white folks talk about white-on-white violence, because if you're going to mention black-on-black violence, you might want to mention white-on-white violence as well. So I want to go back to start with you, Brittany, on this issue. Earlier you talked about what is being done, and I think what a lot of people have to understand is that when we talk about the Black Freedom Movement, we spend time talking about this march, this protest, this rally, but the work that was being done was what took place after the march, after the rally, and we're seeing that with Black Lives Matter. How do you get people to understand that just because you're not seeing the protests on the news every day, work is not being done?
It's certainly a challenge, and in any institution, in any movement, 10% of the people are doing about 90% of that behind-the-scenes work, right? Planning the platforms, asking the hard questions, doing the writing, creating the art, pushing the policy that is going to make a difference for years to come. And so I think we've decided to not concern ourselves as much with convincing people that work is being done, but doing what my mother says and showing people better than you can tell them. So showing up when candidates are running, either the candidates that we are in favor of and making sure that we have their back, registering people, getting their names out, people like Nikita Oliver, who just ran for mayor in Seattle, or whether it's folks that we are trying to hold accountable in a different way, right? County prosecutors, mayors, city councilors, doing so much to make sure that we keep this thing going, but we're also making sure that this conversation is broader than just police violence. As you talked about, if we create healthy communities from the ground up, we don't have to worry about them being over-policed from the top down. This is why we continue to work on LGBTQ issues. This is why we continue to work on education issues, on housing, on employment, on systems of broader criminal justice and cash bonds and bails and mass incarceration. So everybody is kind of playing their role, if you will. Lots of people are moving in lots of different lanes, but toward the same goal of freedom and liberation for black folks.
But Greg, on that point though, it is a catch-22, and that is you have to keep doing things that are visible so people don't believe it's died. That was the one thing that Dr. King struggled with, Roy Wilkins struggled with, Dorothy Height struggled with, because they're saying, look, because people say, oh, I don't see anything, so therefore it must be over and dead.
No, Brittany nailed it. I mean, we have to build these community infrastructures that continue the momentum, and we have to study. Can't stress that enough. After the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act 65, what we see in that next decade is this surge of black political elected officials. And what we see is that once we got those folks in place during the 1970s and 80s, you see this bloom and this blossom. But then you see the systems that we were fighting against push back against that. And here we are now about to perhaps enter a similar cycle. If we don't learn the lessons of what happened the last time so we can connect and make different changes, then we will repeat what happened. We'll just go back and forth and back and forth. And that's not forward progress. That's just movement.
But that's part
Spencer, also, this is critically important. and that is, and I think this is where Black Lives Matter is, Brittany and I have discussed this along with others as well. You also have to deal with the maturation process of a movement.
Yes.
And that is, you have to actually put the infrastructure together because it has to sustain itself. People actually have to have salaries. They have to pay their bills. They have to eat. They have to live. And so a lot of people also don't understand is that you can't just be protesting. You literally have to create the infrastructure to survive.
And this infrastructure piece is, you know, TV is great and going on and giving a speech is wonderful, but building a sustainable infrastructure that can show up, that can plan, that takes the work. That's the, you know, the 10% of the people who are doing 90% of the work that Brittany talks about are investing that time. And that's really what we need in terms of Black folks when we talk about institutions and infrastructure. It's much bigger than the charisma of one leader or one president or anything. The infrastructure is key.
That's right.
Liz, real quick, then I'm going to go to Brittany for the last question.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also important for us to kind of go back to that number about how white people are looking at black on black crime is more important. It also tends to cause me to think that it's an issue that black people should only focus on, the crime that we have in our community, and we're forcing them to look at an issue that is, you know, transcending race. Police brutality impacts people of all race, but to make sure that we kind of guide the conversation that this is not about black people, it's about Americans. This is an American issue. This is not a black issue.
See, I would say black folks in and of themselves have value that we should be concerned about, right? We shouldn't always universalize everything.
And apart.
Oh, we already
hold ourselves separate and apart. This is it. We will not get the full participation of our communities at large, not just the black community, but the American community, if we hold ourselves separate and apart. This is an American issue.
Yes, it's an American issue, but also we're most concerned about it because it's affecting us. Brittany, real quick here, on that whole point, people in Black Lives Matter are learning, guess what? The fundraising piece, the long-term piece, and again, you have to put these pieces together. About 30 seconds, final comment.
This is why it's important, as I always say, to battle and build. The battle creates the crisis, as Dr. King said, that forces institutions to pay attention, but we have to build something in its place that is more equitable and just for all of us. At the end of the day, it's so important that people go see Who Streets this weekend, put money back into our community so we can build that infrastructure, because we're not just concerned with defining ourselves according to what white people say we're not. We're concerned with creating a world that is equal and just for all of us, and that has the humanity of black people in great concern.
Brittany Packnett, Campaign Zero, we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.